Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very special Philly Blitz TV live stream. I'm Parth here with Quell and Pierre, and with a special guest, Al Thompson of Football Stories. So, kind of a funny story of how Al and I met. I was on my way back to Philadelphia from Chicago, and Al was on his way back to Philly as well, but from Detroit. And so I remember getting on the plane and him sitting next to me, and you're not supposed to look over, but I looked over and I saw his phone. And I just saw a bunch of Eagle stuff, and I was like, "Oh, that's interesting." And I was trying to put this in my head. I'm like, "Who could this be?" Like Eagle stuff. And I was like, "All right, Detroit is not that far from Chicago." And I was just trying to do all the math in my head, and then Al ended up introducing himself, and I was like, "Wow,
The flight got bumpy.
it
So
did."
whenever it gets bumpy, I start talking to anybody. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whoever's next to me, you're in my conversation because that kind of keeps me cool. And I was probably looking at my videos I take when you're at the players' locker, and they let you take videos of the the athlete talking, and I might have been looking at that, just to have something to do on the plane right back, or figuring out how I was going to upload it when I get off the plane. So that's how we met. I just started talking to him. Then all of a sudden he blurts out that he has a podcast and he's an Eagles. He likes the Eagles, and I said, he says, you got to be on my show sometime. So here we are.
Finally made it happen. So thank you so
but,
much again. We're super excited.
But to your people, I'm not a big name in Philly. I've been covering the Eagles though for 37 years. Covered 26 Super Bowls. I'm not one of those hands you see underneath the guy's face, and when you're watching it on TV and you don't know who that hand is or the microphone, that's my hand. All right, and so you never see me. So, but it's been an incredible ride all these years, and in 2018, I finally got to see the Eagles win a Super Bowl, but not so great this year. But it was still a great time out in Phoenix. Eagles fans were amazing. They really were.
It looked like it, and I mean, at least it was a good game. It was a good game, to say the least. And
well, would you guys? I'll ask you this: would you rather have your favorite team, or if you were playing on a team, would you rather get blown out so it doesn't even bother you, I guess, or would you like to have a nail biter like what happened with the Eagles? What would you feel better with in your memory long term?
I swear I asked these guys the same question, and it was a little bit different when I asked it to them, but I asked the same question earlier in the year. I asked it in reference to the Colts Vikings game where the Colts went up so many points early, and then they just historically blown lead basically. And I told them, like, I heard someone say to me, I would have rather my team just get blown out than them blow the record lead. And I'm like, I don't know, man, because I know me personally, when I watch football games, I'm pretty animated. I have a good time, especially if my team is doing really good. So for me to go through, even if it's 2 quarters of my team playing phenomenal football, I enjoyed that versus the miserableness that you would feel watching your team get blown out for 4. I remember back in, I would like to say it was 2008. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's 2008. The year that the Eagles played the Ravens. I think it was in Baltimore. The game, McNabb got benched and Kevin Cobb threw the interception in the red zone. Ed Reed took 108 yards. And I just remember sitting watching that game. And me personally, I live in the Washington, D.C. area. And it's funny because it happened to us this year. I can't remember what team we were playing, but I think it was the Giants game earlier this year. We were beating them so bad that in this area, they kicked us off TV for the next game. So it felt good to be on the better end. But I remember in 2008 when the Ravens,
I was there.
He got that interception, and oh my goodness,
Cobb tried to tackle Ed Reed, and it looked like he was like the Persian army just destroyed him on his way to the end zone. So it was a pretty horrible game if you're an Eagles fan, that's for sure. A great memory there. So the Eagles had a phenomenal year. It looks like I was going through the starting defense, and they're losing like 8 guys. Could leave, not lose. I don't know if they're going to lose them all, but it looks like they could lose. 8 guys could leave, something like that. So pretty interesting off season for them, to say the least.
Definitely. I mean, crazy season in general too. And we were talking about how there were signs of growth in the offense. To answer your question, I think I would rather take a close game too, just because.
Same here, yeah.
the growth that we saw in Jalen Hurts all year, and for him to capitalize like that way in a Super Bowl, especially after the way the season ended last year, that was great to see. And like you said, Quell, the highs in those games were so high, it was incredible. I mean, some of those plays, that 2-point conversion,
that touchdown to AJ Brown, brother.
Oh my
I
God.
was over the moon.
AJ gave him the hezzy, and then when, oh my God, that was it was. I mean, I was screaming so much, I lost my voice for 2 days. Like I was at home. So
yeah, I want my team to be Warriors and to go down, on their shields, and the Eagles definitely did. They made 2 critical errors in that game that really cost them the game. And I think the Chiefs played like the Villanova team did in 1985, if you remember. I don't know if you guys were around for that, but the game you would remember, the history of it is that Villanova was a crazy underdog against Patrick Ewing and Georgetown, and they had to play. They played a perfect game, and that was the only way they were going to win the game. I think they shot like 80%. Nobody's ever going to break their shooting record for that game, game, and I think the Chiefs had that kind of thing. They couldn't make a mistake. They made one mistake in that game, but they had one turnover in that game. They lose that game, and they didn't make a single error, and came out and they couldn't. The Eagles didn't stop them even once in the second half, and it was just the Eagles made 2 errors: the 65-yard punt return, and of course it was a bad punt, which kind of started the whole thing off, according to the coaches, and then of course the fumble. And I asked that. If you go back and you watch the second question of his press conference, that's me asking him about, would that be, it's funny, he looks for familiar faces. A lot of the players do. There's this scene of all these faces around him, and that you see him sitting in that booth, right? And he's like, he would know me, but he doesn't know my name. And but he's staring at me, and I'm like, okay, I get it. And so I asked him, I said, you scored 3 touchdowns, you threw for another, you had this phenomenal game, and the only thing you remember though from this game is the scoop and score fumble. And he said, you heard what he said. I don't know if you remember seeing his press conference, but he said that it was big, and basically he said, yeah, that's probably pretty much the only thing he's going to remember is fumbling that ball, because he doesn't fumble the ball. Eagles are, everybody's talking about the parade. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think for me, given the fact that it was the Super Bowl, like you said, you want your team to be Warriors. You want them to come out and compete, and at least make the game close.
Yeah.
But one of the questions I had for you, you talked about being there to interview Jalen after the game and whatnot. Does he come across the same way in person as he does like from us watching at home?
Yeah, he's like
the stoicness of it all.
Yeah, absolutely. He's a 55-year-old man, soul, and he's a 55-year-old 30-year high school coach in a 24-year-old's body. I mean, from the day he walked in there, you're like, who is this guy? Yeah, I know, because he's like that everywhere. He started his thing even when he was a backup to Carson Wentz. He started his thing where he would stop people in the hallway and question them if they knew a play, as if he knew he was going to rise and take over this team. He is a phenomenon as a leader. I mean, if he wasn't, an NFL quarterback, he'd be a U.S. senator or he'd be running for president or something. I mean, he's that mature. I've never seen anybody that mature for so long. But yeah, to answer your question, he is like that all the time. There's no he doesn't take a minute off. And I think even if he wins the Super Bowl at some point, he'll take like a day, and then he'll just get right back to do what he's doing. He's a coach's son. He enjoyed it. I don't think there's any resentment. Like some people might not like it, like they're sick of the whole act, but he's not at all. And when he went back to Houston, the post game, there were people in the press conference that were from there that I think were involved with him when he was in high school. And so, yeah, he's the real deal. And the Eagles, I mean, you picked this guy in the second round, so you kind of got lucky in a lot of ways. And he's not like Russell Wilson. A lot of people talk about him being, with the private office and some of the stories that other players are talking about, having to make an appointment with him. I don't think that's ever going to happen with this guy. There's no way. He's just he's a treasure for this team. And I can't wait to see what they pay him. And you wonder if AJ Brown knows something, like maybe there's some snags in it. He's kind of bull rushing the Eagles on that, right? Because you're not going to sign him, send me right with him, ship me out, So
there were some other parts of that podcast that were interesting too. That the Chiefs were interested in him, and all these. There were multiple other suitors, obviously, but just the Chiefs were there and all that. But he still wanted to come play with Jalen. He saw something special in Jalen, and like you said. Exactly. And but it still takes a chance, right? Like even if it's your best friend, you might not want to. If you play with Ryan Tannehill for 4 years, you don't necessarily want to go play with Ryan Tannehill again. No. And so he believed that Jalen had that ability.
I remember this because he was an Eagle before he went there, and people thought it was the worst trade when they traded the receiver for their receiver. I can't think of his name right now. It was a second-round pick, and it turned out to be a total bust. They sent Dennis Kelly.
Dorial Green-Beckham?
Yeah. And
I thought he was going to be so good.
Dennis Kelly. And they thought, man, the Eagles scammed them. And in that AFC title game, Dennis Kelly caught a touchdown pass.
That's right. That's right.
And so I just you have to wonder if A.J. Brown's looking over at that going like, that could have been me. Why is he getting the touchdown? But yeah, I mean, I think he wanted to get out. I mean, I've been there. A couple years ago, the fact the year after the Eagles won the Super Bowl, I was in Tennessee and Nashville for that game, and the Eagles lost in overtime with Marcus Mariota was the quarterback, and it was a big deal. I mean, the reason why the game sold out was because 60% of the crowd was from Philly. I was there. I went down there and went to practice on Friday. Beautiful facility. But when you get there, it's like, do they have a football team in Nashville? I mean, you wouldn't even know.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, here, if you land in Philadelphia and you walk through the King of Prussia Mall or you walk through the Reading Terminal, right, at 13th and Market, all you're going to see is Eagle stuff all over the place. And the minute you get off the plane, but you get down where the Nashville, Tennessee Titans are, and there isn't any enthusiasm on the same breath as like the old teams like Philly and the Giants and the Bears, and it's not even the same breath. And I asked one of the guys there, what was their home opener? Because I remember they played somebody like Jacksonville, who doesn't have that big following that follows them around. Mm-hmm. If the Giants played Tennessee, it'd be packed with Giants fans. So, but I asked him, I said, what was the opener like? Because I remember who they played, and he said the stadium was there for their home opener of a pretty good team. The stadium wasn't even half full. So if you're A.J. Brown, what a culture shock when he comes here. And I think he wanted that, like Bryce Harper is, showcasing Phillies fans to free agents to come here, right? And because he shows them the fans at their best. So, but A.J. Brown, I think he really likes it here. And but he's a diva. I mean, he's doing diva things right now. So hopefully it'll work.
As long as he produces and he doesn't do sit-ups in his driveway.
No, I don't think he's ever going to get crazy like that. But he's definitely a diva,
Yeah.
And but who cares?
Personally, I've been saying the Eagles need a little bit of that. Everyone's a little bit too humble. You need that little bit of flavor, a little bit of spice in the locker room. Someone who gets mad about not getting the ball. And I mean, I've been reading that Devontae has some of that in him as well. And so I think they both just complement each other so well. But you spoke just recently that maybe there's a snag or what might be going on. Who knows? But what do you think we can kind of expect when we're looking at Jalen Hurts' contract?
I would think it's probably in the neighborhood, and nobody knows. I mean, they're really tight-lipped on this and doing a great job of it, not leaking anything.
Mm-hmm.
Is I would say in the neighborhood of, he may not want to sign like an 8-year deal or something crazy, like the baseball players are doing. Mm-hmm. So maybe 5 years, $250 million, probably all guaranteed,
right?
Something like that. I mean, he proved he's the real deal. He's durable for the most part. The injury that he had wasn't like from a defective knees or ankles or whatever. Right. I mean, he was stomped on, and in that. So he's not injury prone at all. He was super durable in college. I mean, look at his college career. All 4 years he was in the college playoffs. All 4. and then he comes here into the Super Bowl. His second year as a starter. It's like, wow. And then you have all these other guys with the pedigree. We're going to get to see Jordan Davis next year. Is he going to be able to step up and play like a national champion? Is Nakobe Dean going to be able to step up?
Nakobe Dean.
You know, because I think they're probably going to lose a lot of those linebackers. Kazir White's probably gone, and that's some of the things we're going to talk about. But
so why don't we transition to that? So you mentioned earlier there's 8 players on defense. I mean, we're going to lose both linebackers, cornerback 2, both safeties are at least hitting the market. Half the D line is going. So who do you think, the Eagles are going to prioritize keeping around? I know there's been a lot of buzz about CJ Gardner-Johnson, keeping him around and, maybe franchise tagging him if they can't come to a long-term agreement. But who else can we kind of expect to see back?
One of the things that that we've always seen with the Eagles, one of the toughest spots that have always been for them to fill have been linebacker and in the secondary. And I would think that they're probably going to use that 10th overall pick, whether they stay at 10 or move up or back a little bit. But they're probably going to use that for that second D back, I think, to take the place of James Bradbury, because I think his number is just going to be too high for them. So they may have a rookie there. And Kansas City did pretty good with some rookies in their secondary this year. Yeah. And then so James Bradbury is probably gone. Darius Slay is here, obviously. Avonte Maddox will be back. Marcus Epps could be gone, but he's not a high ticket item, so he's somebody they could probably keep and probably want to keep. CJ Gardner-Johnson, I agree with you. There's some decent rumors out there that they would franchise tag him because they don't want to let him go. And that's the position that he played, and he played really well until he had a lacerated kidney. And he is one of the funniest people you have ever met in your life. And a lot of people didn't get to see him. If you listen to some of our broadcasts, he is hilarious and a real locker room guy.
Yeah.
In a weird way. He's just a character. He's very Darius Slay like. Don't ever call Darius Slay Darius.
Darius, right?
You get yelled at. He was calling out strangers at Monday night, opening night at the Super Bowl. It's packed. And Darius, he goes, Slay, 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 and cracking up laughing because I did that. I did the first time he walked. He goes and he jumps over the thing. It's boiling hot outside at training camp, and he leans over the table, goes, Slay. I go, I got it. So anyway, he'll be back obviously, but CJ Gardner-Johnson I think should be a huge. They really got to pull out all the stops to get him to stay. Javon Hargrave was such a beast inside, double digits. He's playing tackle and he has double-digit sacks. I mean, that's really hard to do. And I don't know about Brandon Graham and Fletcher Cox. I mean, they're really long on the tooth. They had pretty good years. It's really up to them because they know they're going to have to pay the quarterback. Whether Brandon Graham and Fletcher Cox, I'm sure they would want them back, but probably at a lower price. I mean, they paid Fletcher Cox something like $14 million last year. They paid Brandon Graham a pretty decent amount of money. If they want to hang around and try to grab another ring, we'll see. Hassan Reddick's not going anywhere. Josh Sweat's not going anywhere. TJ Edwards, the most unsung hero of this season, I think. And you wonder what's going on. Is he going to end up in Arizona as like the first big signee for Jonathan Gannon? I mean, he was his guy. He did all the plays. He was the one that called all the plays, had all the plays into his helmet. Mm-hmm. He was tied for 7th in the NFL in the regular season for tackles, and he was a free agent draft pick. I mean, he's like a general manager's dream because you didn't pay anything for him.
Right.
His cap hit was $711,000 last year, and he was 7th in the NFL in tackles. And they were good tackles. Most of the time, they were good tackles. They weren't like 20 yards downfield.
Right. Clean up, stuff, racking up the stats like that. But I got
White. Yeah, but Kazir White, he was okay. He had some moments at the beginning of the season, but he kind of faded a little bit. But TJ Edwards was strong right to the Super Bowl. He was second. Okay, go ahead.
So with TJ, right, a lot of he's a great player, right? He's got it all up there. The instincts are all there. It feels like a lot of times he gets exploited in pass coverage, right? He can be a step slow. Is that something you have to keep in mind when you're going to pay him? Is there something you want to add, Quill?
Yeah. So maybe to help a little bit with that, maybe that's kind of why, like, it's kind of a two-headed sword type of thing, the way I look at it. And that's kind of the emphasis on why I'll just say it. Maybe he ends up in Arizona with Gannon. Because first of all, before you think about if you want to bring TJ back or not, you need to figure out who your defensive coordinator will be. And we'll touch on that in a minute. But let's say in a made up scenario in this instance, the team goes with a guy like what's the name? Desai from Seattle.
Sean Desai.
Yeah. And he runs a pretty similar, I mean, he probably runs more cover 2 than Gannon would, but a pretty similar scheme in terms of principles that Gannon would run. But like you just said, TJ Edwards was more of a liability in coverage. But when you think about in Gannon's defense, the defense that you and all three of us have had the conversation all year long about how we feel about it. And I believe the emphasis, like I've been steadfast on the fact that if Arizona, hopefully we're just assuming that Chicago trades back. But Arizona's best case scenario is they can get their hands on Jalen Carter at 3 because we know the emphasis of him having a dude in the middle of the defense. Arizona's best case scenario is, like Al just said, probably getting their hands on a TJ Edwards because, I mean, we know that at least I like to personally think Isaiah Simmons has some untapped potential there. They drafted Xavier Collins a few years back. They got some guys in that linebacker room that they move around. They move like the modern day NFL. They just don't have the head there. So getting a guy like TJ Edwards in the room who already knows the calls, who would basically be the coach on the field, could play a big role for those kind of guys, a huge role for those kind of guys.
And I think they made up for a lot of it when they had great players like C.J. Gardner-Johnson and Avonte Maddox. It helped them a lot. And Hassan Reddick, you know, he's a hybrid player. I think those guys helped. I mean, they were the number 2 overall defense in the NFL. So TJ Edwards may not be perfect, that's for sure. But boy, he's when you look at how much they paid for him, what he contributed, just he was not afraid of the spotlight because he's you know, the Eagles defense gave up 24 points in the Super Bowl. 14 of those points were from a scoop and score and the 65-yard punt return. So they weren't really that bad. They shut them out in the first half, basically one touchdown on their opening drive, and then shut them out for the rest of the half, and then they were brutal in the second half. You know, but still, they still only allowed 24 points. So I personally, I'd love to see them bring TJ Edwards back because why? My question to you guys is, how come the Kobe Dean didn't beat him out?
Well, that was our question. Like, he looked good when he played.
Win, not to make a feel-good story about a rookie free agent making it all the way to the starting lineup.
Right. So,
but I think that's the thing. I'm sorry, Par.
Oh, yeah. So I was just going to say, I thought it came down to experience. I think Gannon, especially this year, it's a lot like Doc Rivers and what we're seeing in that, like, you got the vets, you know, the guys who know what they're doing, you know that, you know, you're getting a fixed return, right? I think with the coordinator like Gannon, his whole philosophy comes from not being beat. And I think that kind of
he hates impact plays.
Yeah, exactly. And so and those can go both ways, right? And so you have to take a chance on some of those. And TJ Edwards, like you said, he's a coach's dream, general manager's dream. He's consistency. He's consistency through and through. And so it's hard to take out someone who's consistent, even though there's someone who could bring some more of a delta and, you know, bring some more juice to the position. It's hard to maybe take him out. And so I thought it was confusing because when Nakobe played, like, for example, against Tennessee for the couple snaps he got in, it looked like he was playing instinctively and well. So, you know, it is something that's been on my mind. And so then, you know, with this obvious kind of transition point coming, makes me question, do we want to get into a bidding war with Arizona for TJ Edwards if we have Nakobe Dean in the building? You know, a guy who's been listening and learning, and by all accounts has the ability to be a green dot, was a green dot on a national championship team.
But see, that's where you kind of have to realize I mean, I say this quite often. I mean, I try to talk ball with you guys and get into the nitty gritty with the schematics of the teams like to run during the season. But this is my type. This is my time of year right here. I love trying to think like the general manager, scout the players, and all of that type of good stuff. And that aspect, you got to remember two things, at least how I view this perception. One, like we just talked about a second ago, and what TJ Edwards would mean to that defense. One thing I didn't say when I was talking was the biggest thing to a Jonathan Gannon defense, and I'm surprised it took me to the Super Bowl to realize this, because this is something we never said on pod, and if we did, it wasn't on purpose. But the biggest thing to a Jonathan Gannon defense, while yes, it's perfect to have a guy like that in the middle, but the biggest thing is communication. That's why they got beat on them 2 touchdowns in the Super Bowl. Like the ability to communicate from all 11 players on that field is massive. And all that starts with the guy with the green dot, who was TJ Edwards. So to have him there would be massive. Now, on the flip side of that is you got to realize who your general manager is. Howie Roseman told you a long time ago. I mean, granted, he tried to walk back a little last year, like, okay, my defensive coordinator clearly values this position, so maybe I open my eyes a little bit. But he told you, I really don't value the linebacker position. I don't think, based on how the modern day NFL is played, that the linebacker position is something that I should care about, which is why you go out and draft a guy like Nakobe. And you remember the conversation we had during draft season last year when you wanted Nakobe in the second, and they took Cam Jurgens. And I said positional value, positional value. Howie Roseman is huge on positional value. Huge.
Gonna make me crazy.
And when you get that, when you able to get a guy like Nakobe, who, like you guys just talked about, how you feel real good about him, how he was at Georgia wearing the green dot, how you feel good about what he learned from everybody. If you can get a guy like that in the 3rd round, and you understand that your 2 starting linebackers are scheduled to be free agents, that gives you a whole lot of leeway as a general manager, because you're not really as pressed to sign both of them back. If you get one of them back, that'd be nice. But it really wouldn't surprise me if the Eagles went linebacker in the 3rd round again this year to try to get somebody to pair with Nakobe and just pray.
Or sign Bobby Wagner.
That'd be interesting. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah, and you could overpay a TJ Edwards because he's so used to being underpaid. You could overpay him, and it wouldn't be something crazy. You know what I mean? Like overpaying him, he technically in real money made like $2.2 million last year. And that's not gonna. I mean, Hassan Reddick's making 15, and so but he's hybrid. I mean, he's not a defensive end, but he's not a linebacker. He's a pass rusher, and so whatever that is. So it'd be interesting. What do you guys think of Tracy Rocker as the defensive coordinator? Because they're not. I mean, there's no way to gauge what the Eagles are doing. They're interviewing everybody. I mean,
they're everybody. When I tweeted this the other day, actually, when I say they're going out of their way, exhausting all avenues to find a possible defensive coordinator, of course, I would expect them to reach out to the college ranks. I mean, it would have been absurd for them not to reach out to Leonard. Now, I understand that like he said, he planned on taking a year off in the first place. Now, the Eagles reaching out for it. Of course, you would keep your interest.
A lot of times, these interviews are for the ownership and for Howie Roseman. Is they're just trying to,
see what's out there, right?
They're stealing their ideas and everything. They get him in there and they can write it. Oh, that was pretty good. We're not going to hire him, but we really like
diligence.
Yeah. So I mean, sometimes when you go to interviews, you're being used, so to speak. You know what I mean? Like, they don't really have any intention of hiring you.
Yeah.
They're just want to pick your brain and what you think of the team or what you thought of the team last year. And according to his press conference on I think it was Monday, Nick Sirianni said that he wants to maintain the same basic themes that he had with Steichen and with Jonathan Gannon. With Jonathan Gannon, he doesn't want to have explosive plays. He knows that in the grand scheme of the analytics, that it's those plays that kill you in the end. And he had the players this year. It worked. It didn't work in the second half of the Super Bowl, but for the season, it worked pretty good.
Exactly.
And so one of the questions I had for you, from your vantage point, being around the team on almost a daily basis, with them looking for a new defensive coordinator, do you think they'll lean more towards a guy who has like NFL experience or like more innovation from the college ranks? Like, I know they've interviewed Michigan's defensive coordinator.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that they're going to have so many new faces. He's not whoever the defensive coordinator coming in here isn't going to be facing like this fraternity, so to speak. If it was offense, different story, because you've already got Jordan Mailata, and you're not going to tell him what to do. You're not going to tell Landon Dickerson what to do. You're not going to tell Jason Kelsey what to do. You're not going to tell Lane Johnson what to do, right? And you got this amazing receiving core. So you have a group that's already knows what they're doing. Defensively, they could take that chance and go with somebody new because, he's not going to walk into this wall of some, like a bro barn, and with everybody's murals on the wall, but a guy like Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham, if they did come back on discounted contracts, they would be probably for say it was a college coach, they would probably be ideal the way that they would have his back, so to speak.
Right.
Follow me? They need him to fit in right away because I got to get my ring now. I don't have 5 years. I have this year. And so, and we'll see what they do with Ndamukong Suh and Linval Joseph. That's all interesting. Those guys fell into their laps. Remember, the Eagles were leaking at run.
It was that a Commanders game, and then the next day, Howie signs Linval and Suh.
and Washington was horrible, and the Green Bay game was horrible. Special teams was really horrible. So
special teams is an issue all year.
Yeah. So and it killed them in the Super Bowl. But but those guys were great. They're going to be players like Bradbury fell in their lap. There's going to be a Patrick Robinson back in 2018. Remember?
Yeah.
He kind of fell in their lap, and he makes the play of the playoffs against Minnesota. Remember? They were kind of back on their heels.
6.
Minnesota scores
Ronald Darby. Ronald Darby just gave up his body on that block. Just got
sacrificed.
Who was it? It was McKinnon, right? He ran through him. I think. Oh my God, that was so.
Because McKinnon was the only one that was going to catch Patrick Robinson. Yeah. And I had one of the best interviews I ever had was him doing. You could line it up to the actual play, and boy, he nailed everything. He says, "I knew that lineman. I had him." And then I saw McKinnon, the running back. He goes, "That's when I waved over, who was Ronald Darby."
Yeah,
like block, and then he was in the end zone. But anyway, but they found this guy. They're going to find guys. They know that, and especially when you have a team that has championship caliber aspirations, Ndamukong Suh. Oh, you need some help to stop the leaking and running. Oh, Linval Joseph and Ndamukong Suh, 2 Super Bowl champs. One's almost certainly going to be in the Hall of Fame. We're just sitting there and they go, we'll help out, because you're going to the Super Bowl. we want to go for the ride, So that kind of stuff is going to happen to help them out a little bit. But defensive coordinator, they can take that chance. I think. I don't know what you guys think. With a new guy to the scene, because they're not going to have this frat house type thing that they would have was offense, and it's probably going to be Brian Johnson as the offensive coordinator.
I like Brian Johnson a lot as the OC. I'm really excited about that. I think the offense was really great this year and everything, but there was a lot of room for growth, right? Hot routes were just something that people talked about all year, and I think that's something Brian Johnson could implement. I'm a big Gator fan. That's my college team, and so I watched Brian Johnson's coach team, and hot routes were a huge part of that. Kyle Trask to Kyle Pitts, it was just hot routes all day, so they were able to make that work. And so Jalen to any of these receivers or tight ends we have is something that I think we'll see a lot more of, and hopefully less QB power. So we don't see Jalen just getting stomped on and all those types of things, just running him into the ground in the Bears game. But defensively, I think I want them to go outside. It'd be cool to get some fresh perspective. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of how I know the defense statistically was up there, but to my eye test and how I felt, not even eye test, gut test, how I felt watching the games and how my stomach felt. Every time we played a good quarterback who was willing to take a check down or willing to not just, look for an explosive play, my stomach sank. And I watched quarterback after quarterback go through this defense like a hot butter through knife. Last year it was Derek Carr, and then this year it was and Dak is a good quarterback, but it was Dak and all these other quarterbacks. I was impressed when we were able to stop Kirk. That was like my point. Like, oh, maybe we're gonna stop this.
But Kirk Cousins was at the beginning of the season when they played the Cowboys. They weren't just missing Jalen Hurts; they were missing a whole bunch of guys in the secondary.
Absolutely, listen, I agree with that, but it was just
Gardner Johnson didn't play in that game.
Not only did Gardner Johnson not play, but Avonte Maddox was his first game back and went out in the first. I say all the time, as soon as Avonte went out,
I can bring up other examples of games. It's not like the Cowboys game is the only one. I'm not gonna sit here and I'm not being crazy for that. It was multiple games. It was a theme people talked about, that when decent quarterbacks who aren't just looking for a big play they're able to just take they're able to take the smaller stuff and work their way down the field. It's a bend don't break defense, but the defense broke, and you can't always do that. And so I thought Gannon needed to get a little bit more adventurous. And I think Gannon just personally is a conservative coach, and he does not want to take chances like that. Like you said, he doesn't want the explosives. He doesn't want to take those chances. And so my hope is that even if we have an internal candidate, or even if we have someone who has a similar, defensive philosophy, they're still willing to take some chances sometimes, because I just think playing your defense and backpedal is tough.
I couldn't agree with you more. In the Super Bowl, it was Patrick Mahomes was all in on nitpicking down the field. He was all in on that. He wasn't even going to try. He threw one 22-yard pass the entire game in the opening drive to Kelsey over the middle, if you remember. All the rest of it was just all those really wide screens or whatever they call them, and they're basically running plays. And why, at some point, didn't you take a chance with some kind of a defensive back blitz of some kind, or just some way of disguising that you're going to go for it and make a play? And they didn't do it even once in the second half.
That's all I asked for.
Yeah, I agree with you that if he's just got you guys. It's like that tennis player that's got you. He's hitting the ball to either corner, and you're running back and forth across the baseline, and you can't stop it. Like, how do I stop it? Patrick Mahomes did that to the Eagles all second half. And where was the creativity? I agree with you. Where was some kind of package or trick play he could have done defensively to sucker? I mean, he might be one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. You're not going to sucker Patrick Mahomes into anything, but for one play, maybe just give it a shot.
I think that's the overarching.
He got burned
in the red zone, though.
He shouldn't have did it in the first place. In the red zone, I told y'all he shouldn't have just not blitzed them. Just don't do it.
You can blitz without going cover zero. It's not it's a novel concept. You can do that. It's not like you have to go all out blitz.
But I think that's the overarching thing that a lot of people wanted to see from Jonathan Gannon, especially because, during his first year, a lot of people made the claim that, he didn't have the pieces that he needed to run for his potential defensive scheme. But I think the overarching thing people wanted to see was just more innovation and adjustments. Like, me personally, I tend to agree with Parth. I'm not a fan of the whole sit back and try to prevent the big play. I like defenses that take it to an opposing offense, right? And so, yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. Just more innovation, like you said, creativity.
But he did have 78 sacks in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And including
apparently, that's what happens when you have really good players.
Yeah.
And you're not designing anything for anybody. Like, he didn't have.
It's one of the most stacked D lines of all time. Let's be. It's one of. Come on, the depth on this D line is ridiculous.
The same Fletcher Cox that we said y'all told me that we should let him go because he was basically taking steps back.
Was I talking about Fletcher Cox? He's not even one of the double-digit sack guys. We had 4 double-digit sack guys.
Did anybody see Brandon Graham having double-digit sacks coming back from it? All I'm saying is the same way that we look at Jalen Hurts and we look at all these players credit.
Why are you? It's because of the defensive coordinator that they got the sacks. Please. I think Hassan Reddick had the year of his life.
But I mean, Jonathan Gannon is no longer in Philadelphia, so I think.
Do you think he's gone?
Never came back here.
Brandon Graham?
No.
No. Jonathan Gannon. Brandon Graham is always welcome in the city. He's a hero.
But you know what the thing is? They let us do. They if you're there for the coordinator's day, like Tuesday, if you go to that, and not many people go, and this is probably why they do it. There's only like 12, 15 guys there. And the press conference ends, the cameras are off, and he stands on the side and the floor in front of the stage. And you can't have your tape recorder on, and you can't have any way of recording anything. And you're really not allowed to talk about anything he says. Not allowed, but I mean, it's like this is all off the record. And you really, that was when I became really impressed with Steichen. I mean, just how smart he was. And same thing with Gannon to a certain extent. When you see them in that informal where they kind of let loose and really tell you their thoughts, and some of it surprises you. Steichen's got a foul mouth. I mean, amazing how much he curses. But the the mics aren't on, But I understand it now. Why Gannon? People are like, why do you get all these interviews? But if you saw him in that setting, it's like, wow, he's really impressive, And so he didn't always come off like that. He's not a Eagles fans never really accepted him. I think there was a couple of games where people gave him, his props, this year. But in the end, I don't think Eagles fans really warmed up to him. I think they did with Shane Steichen, and but not Jonathan Gannon. But he is smart. I'll give him that. But sometimes he makes, everybody makes mistakes. I mean, I think I agree with you guys. He should have taken some chances in the Super Bowl in the second half when you were just getting gashed,
annihilated.
Death by 1,000 knives is what Patrick Mahomes did, because they didn't have any big plays. It was just they just matriculated, except for the 26-yard run by the quarterback. Who I had all over my Facebook thinking, oh, he's done, he's out, his ankle shot. Yeah, right. Yeah, he really looked like it, didn't he?
So, I knew it. My mom was like, I feel really bad for him. It looks like he's in a lot of pain. I was like, he's gonna be back. He's like, come on. She's like, I feel really bad, and I was like, don't feel bad. Like we don't need to feel bad for him right now. I was like, we can feel bad in an hour.
So let me ask you this. I know you spoke about the off the record things, right? Is there any story or anything you can provide us at all? Like just a funny story, an experience, or anything like that from those coordinator meetings?
I don't remember his exact words, but the Dallas Cowboys, when they tried that high school lineup on the last play of the game where they had
Zeke at center.
It wasn't FCC would not allow him to say it, but he just kind of totally mocked the whole thing. That was ridiculous, and why would you give up one of your best hands on the team who's ineligible for the first 10 seconds of the play, which is your last play? It wasn't too smart, but that was, just some of those things, like when you were when somebody made a really bad mistake, he would go hold on to the effing ball, like he was ripping, say, a running back or someone who had a fumble or whatever.
Boy, I need to know what he said to Miles Sanders after the first play. I'm dying to.
The Super Bowl?
Yeah.
The Super Bowl? Yeah, we'll never know. We'll never know. But he pulled him. I mean, he only played 2 plays in the whole first half, I think.
Right away.
Kenny G was running the ball during the playoffs. But I mean, based on
but he didn't. I have the Super Bowl stat sheet right here, and the Kenneth Gainwell in the Super Bowl had 7 carries for 21 yards for 3-point yard average.
Honestly,
Sanders had
running the ball.
7 carries, 16 yards. Yeah. Boston Scott 3 carries, 8 yards. They were brutal.
I'm about to say they benched them all. They benched them.
What do you think of the field being there?
Pardon me?
What do you think of the field being there? Watching the game live.
Well, this goes all the way back, and if you go through my Facebook page and look back from Monday night, opening night, I'm asking N'Kobe Dean. I asked Britton Covey. I asked I'm trying to think who else, and even one of the Kansas City players about 2018. Both kickers, Gostkowski and Jake Elliott, in 2018, which was the 2017 season, were complaining to officials about the slickness of the field because of all the paint and with the logos and all the stuff all over the place. And there were 3 kicks missed in that Super Bowl. Gostkowski missed 2. The very next year, I go to the Super Bowl, The Eagles aren't in it, but the Patriots were, and I got Gostkowski by myself at the table and started asking about the logos again. He seemed to get upset, not at me, but just upset at the NFL. Like, why do they have to have these fields like this? Why? What's the purpose? You could put a hologram on there like they do the first yard line. You don't need to paint it. And so the field was a disgrace. As soon as we're like sitting up there, like, did I just see Travis Kelce like slide after he scored the touchdown? Remember they scored in the opening drive. It was him. If you watch the replay of it, he starts slipping all over the place in the end zone. And I'm like, wow. And so I was asking players on Monday, are you going to go out there early and look for things that you could never imagine that are going to shock you? Because that's what happened in 2018 with these kickers. But they did complain first. Like, they wouldn't have thought of that. You would have never thought that the stupid logo for the Super Bowl was slick because all the paint. And and Nakobe Dean's like, oh, I'm not going to do that. You know, I'm like, wow. Brandon Graham had 0 defensive statistics, 0 for the entire game. Hassan Reddick, all pro, right? Pass rusher, had 1 tackle.
It's just mind-blowing, man.
It's mind-blowing that the NFL, they were experimenting. This was a new surface that they were trying. Why wouldn't you do that in the preseason?
Yeah, and that's my thing. Why in the Super Bowl?
Super Bowl?
Yeah,
Like,
it was just
it makes no sense.
Stunning. And then after the L'Jarius Sneed is I'm in the interview room where all those you saw those where they all sit in those booths, you know, after the game. And the L'Jarius Sneed's walking around. It's like an hour after the game. It's the whole thing's almost over. The whole game and interviews and all that are almost over. And he's still in his uniform, which is pretty normal after a Super Bowl. The winning team, they don't want to take their uniforms off. And so the L'Jarius Sneed is walking through, and I looked down at his feet, and I couldn't get my cell phone out fast enough to take a picture of it. But his feet, his cleats, are completely covered with paint. Not dirt, paint. And you could just see it everywhere. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. You know, he's a cornerback. And to have you would expect to see mud, right?
Right.
You want to see mud. And but all you saw was all this multicolored paint all over his cleats. So there's been enough. You know, we're after the game. Why are it was a 3-point game? Forget we're in Philadelphia. And it was, our team in there. Just look at it as a Super Bowl. Just how, the Premier League, the FIFA is fanatical about it. When you watch the World Cup, did you see a giant logo across the field?
No.
Saying World Cup? Because it's the World Cup. You know what I mean? Like, it's the World Cup. You know what I mean? It's the final for the Argentina, right? You know who Lionel Messi is. I don't need you to put a giant word FIFA World Cup in paint all over the middle of the field. You know what I mean? Like, you're watching the Super Bowl. And if you really want to, hologram the thing on there. I hope that Hassan Reddick wasn't being a jerk after the game complaining about it. He went off and saying it was the worst field he ever played on in his life. And he's from Camden. You know what I mean? So he's probably playing some really bad fields when he was in high school. But it's just no excuse for it. It's just so stupid. You know what I mean? If the World Cup doesn't need to put giant logos all over the field, why does the NFL feel the need for it? There was no ads, right? Did you see any ads on that logo? So I hope
no. It's
just not going to take the kickers.
It's just the NFL advertising for the NFL.
Like there are 2 sport in the entire planet, and nobody plays it but us. The World Cup, every country in 200 nations, there are 200 NFLs around the world, right? There's only one NFL, right? And so to me, it's a touchy subject with me. It's like, and then, like I said, the kickers aren't going to get any changes done. More all pros, the quarterbacks, people like Jalen Hurts that you're going to think is going to be in these Super Bowls. Patrick Mahomes has got to open his mouth and say, stop it. The Players Association, has to say stop it. On our Wednesday show, we had Dr. Sean McMillan from Virtual Health Systems on. And he said you could tear an ACL on a slippery field like that.
Odell Beckham.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
you're paying these guys enormous amounts of money. You made up every rule you can possibly imagine to protect your quarterbacks from getting hurt. But so what do? You paint over 50% of the field. Makes no sense.
It's so interesting that you said that, because I can't remember exactly who it was, but some player talked about playing in wherever the Super Bowl was last year. They played their opening night, and you would think the NFL
Vegas?
broadcast. No, it wasn't in Vegas last year. It was LA. It was in LA.
Yeah, it wasn't LA.
That's this year. Sorry.
This year was in Arizona, but the year before, the 2022 Super Bowl was in LA. Because the year before, I did go to Tampa, although we couldn't see anybody, talk to any players or anything. And the same thing with LA; it was all still Zoom, and so I didn't go. So I don't know. I just think it's stupid, and I think it's FIFA has a field because you want to see the beautiful game, right? And I like a green field. I like to see AJ Brown darting across a green field, not across a giant logo. You know what I mean? And there weren't one, there were two.
Agreed.
Right. So
yeah, anyway. It's all over, and they make a big deal about it too. They always have like, oh, we painted the field with this, and this. So totally makes sense.
They practiced on it. You mentioned halftime show was all over it.
Right. Yeah. That always never made sense to me. They roll out stages and then they play on the same field. That just kind of seems bizarre to me. But
completely strange, brother. It's completely strange.
Yeah,
before we transition one time, I do have one question for you. You said something a while back during the conversation that piqued my interest, and you said they interview guys who, like you said, pick their brain, steal information. And as we know, the Eagles recently had Michigan defensive coordinator Jesse Minter in the building. Now we're trying to figure out, I mean, of course, everybody's saying the Eagles just might want to blitz more or something of that nature. That was my first thought process. But when you said what you said, it made it interesting because, as we know, Jesse Minter, before he was in Michigan, he spent a whole lot of time under Wink Martindale in Baltimore.
Yeah.
Both him and Mac McDonald, who's the current defensive coordinator in Baltimore. And, of course,
Martindale
is now the defensive coordinator with the Giants. So do you think, like you said, you went to picking it's a picking brain cycle. Do you think, especially given the fact that I'm pretty sure that Nick was in that room?
Absolutely. And the thing is that they also, besides picking their brains, these coordinators and people like the college players that are coming in, they want to learn how to interview for an NFL team. They want to learn what are they going to ask me? What are some of the things? Because I know I'm probably not going to get this job, but I now have the experience of what an NFL, an NFC champion, interview is like. What's it going to be like when I go to these other meetings? You want to get good at being interviewed. You want to learn how the owners think. And Gannon last year went to a bunch of interviews and nobody grabbed him. This year, probably learned how to express himself better this time around and got what he wanted. But yeah, I mean, they and that's what you talk to the players in the Pro Bowl. All they do, like, it's funny. I still remember it was funny, and they let you stand out in the field during they're not really practices. They could have hang out. They're all in gym shorts, right? When they used to actually play a game. And a few years ago, Patrick Mahomes lost to the New England Patriots on that heartbreaker, right? And then he's in the Pro Bowl. So he's in practice, and it's in Orlando. And you could see him literally recruiting because remember he got crushed with the offensive line. They had all those offensive line woes. Now they pick up the kid, what do you call it?
Orlando Brown.
Free, and they get Joe Tooney. Yeah, and they get these guys in there. They Trey Smith is great. Orlando Brown's always been good, but now he's got an offensive line. Back then he didn't. And you should see him literally trying to recruit Quentin Nelson from the Colts. He just wouldn't leave him alone. He's just following him around like, oh, all right. You can see him like pitching Kansas City to him. You know what I mean? That stuff goes on all week with those guys and stealing each other's secrets, about how did you handle man, you spun Von Miller around like it was a rag doll to Lane Johnson. How did you do that? You know what I mean? And so the players will tell you that I had a long talk with Lane Johnson at that one, and he said, all you do all week is just chit chat and steal stuff, you know, and pick the other guy's brain. These interviews, in a lot of cases, the owner wants to know what you thought, how they did. They may not have any intention of hiring you. They're not going to tell you that. But in my experiences and hearing things is that the owners are and the GM are picking people's brains. You know, so it's and like Quell, you were saying, it's it's they're just trying to steal stuff. You know, they're not going to change their philosophy as long as Nick Sirianni is the head coach. Period. And he's gonna let whoever the offensive coordinator is, he's going to be the offensive coordinator is going to be calling the plays, not him. He said he really learned how to manage the game better. He can yell at the fans. He can run over to the stands and scream at opposing fans and some of the stuff he gets into.
I love it.
But he's a character, and he's like that. He comes into the media tent, and it's like he's making an entrance to the Tonight Show. He's barreling in. You don't see it. You guys don't see it, but he barrels in there and fist pumps every single reporter and cameraman that's standing in there. That's in the middle of the summer. So he doesn't do it every day, but a lot of times he does that kind of stuff. So he's a character. You know, he's impossible not to like him. And like I said, they're going to take their time. If they have to go to the combine without all their coordinators, it seems like they're bringing back
Brian Johnson.
No, the special teams coordinator.
Michael Clay.
He's probably going to be back, and they'll get him a new punter. Because it was more the punter's fault on that 65-yard return, because it was a line drive punt that was short, and it's like at this level, everybody on special teams is like the best player in the history of their school at high school and college. You know, they're playing special teams for you. So they were asking, as soon as he punted it, he said he knew that this could be a problem. You know, so and it was obviously cost him the game. So, but if they have to go to the combine without their coordinators, then so be it. They're going to take their time. They're not going to be rushed, and they can talk the talk. I mean, he's made the playoffs both his years and went to the Super Bowl his second year. So, and the owners, talk about them. They picked Doug Peterson in his second year. He wins the Super Bowl, or third year, and then they get this guy, and boom, you're in the Super Bowl, and you probably should have won the game. You had the better roster, that's for sure. You know,
so before we let you go, and on the topic of Super Bowls, there's a lot.
I had one last question before we got into our last topic, right? And we've touched on the defensive coordinator position in depth, right? But we haven't really gone into the offensive coordinator position or search that much into depth. Do you think it's really just Brian Johnson's job to lose?
Yeah, absolutely. I think because of his relationship with their guy they're going to be giving $250 million to. Yeah, that's his guy. He's a dream. He wants to be coached. One of the best conversations they had, here you are, Nick Sirianni, you played Division III football in college, right? You were just an assistant coach. All of a sudden, you're a head coach. This guy is coming in here. He's played in 4 championship playoff games. He's won a national championship in college. He is so far above you resume-wise. It's ridiculous. And one of the first things Jalen Hurts went to him and said was, I want you to coach me. I want you to yell at me. I want you to, don't hold back, even if it's in the middle of a game. He says he made sure he broke down that any kind of thoughts that Sirianni would have. Hurts went right to him and said, I don't care what it is. I'm doing something stupid. Say you're doing something stupid. And that has worked. That's the way this kid is. You know what I mean? That's maturity beyond your years to have that thought, to go to a head coach and say that, So it's going to be, I'd be shocked if it wasn't Brian Johnson,
That makes sense. So like I was saying, right, we got to the Super Bowl, we got to the big game, second year in Sirianni's as a head coach and all of this.
Yeah.
It seems like it's the beginning, right? It really feels like we could be back. We have the offensive core is there for the foreseeable future. How long do you think our championship window is? That's a question that's on a lot of people's mind. You get there and you don't win, it's always on your mind.
Well, 2 or 3 years. I mean, we always hear about the record Lane Johnson has with this team playing, and it's real. I mean, he is the best. I mean, he's amazing. I mean, he made Hall of Fame defensive ends look silly. He's just got a gift to be able to play that position, and as long as he wants to play. I've gotten to know him a little bit. I don't know him. I don't know his number or any of that stuff. But, I've been around the guy for over a decade, and when he got busted, he said, I'm an activist against PEDs. And when he got busted, he got suspended for 10 games. He's never forgiven himself. And he said to me, use me as an example. So then he left last year for 3 games because of mental health issues. I worry, just as a human being to a human being. Is he going to hang around too long? I don't know. He's got all the money in the world. But as long as he wants to play and he feels healthy, I think he'll be around. And I think if Kelsey stays, it'll probably depend on how Lane Johnson feels. So if you're asking me the question, probably 2 or 3 years. I think Cam Jurgens is a really good backup. If Kelsey comes back, he'll play right guard because they're going to lose Siamalu, and he'll play right guard for a year because they want him to play. They want him to be happy. And that's the way they'll go. The left side is stout, as long as Landon Dickerson. He's really sensitive about it. My read on him is that he gets a little paranoid because he's had, like every other year, he's had these horrible injuries throughout his college career. He has a great year in college, then is out for half the season. Has a great year, then out half the season. It hasn't happened to him here, although he left 3 games this year, remember, and they had to put Dillard in. And I think there's something changed in him during that time that just something wasn't right upstairs. But as long as Landon Dickerson's healthy, wow, they have a Quentin Nelson caliber player at that position. They're going to come right back with Cam Jurgens, and that's where you win your offensive line. You have to have a great offensive line. If Lane Johnson's there, they're a contender for the Super Bowl, no question about it. He could probably play 2 or 3 more years. Lane Johnson could. And I think it kind of revolves around him and who they get to replace him. But right now, today, if you're asking me that, they don't have a replacement him. Jack Driscoll is not Lane Johnson. Nice player, good guy, and he can play, but he is not Lane Johnson. If Micah Parsons was licking his chops, you remember, when he had to go in there and play for him in Dallas. That was another player that they were missing. So anyway, that's what I think.
That's really special right there. And I mean, just for some of you guys who I understand he's been on the roster for a few years now, we may not think about it like that, but I'm pretty sure it's in the back of all the coaches in Howie's mind and in Landon Dickerson's mind. But like Al just said, speaking highly of Landon Dickerson is a special talent, man. And I think sometimes that gets lost beside the guys that he's playing next to. But we're talking about a guy who he played center because he needed to. The team needed a center. He wasn't a center, and he looked special, dude. They call him the Patrick Mahomes of centers while he was doing that. He began his career at left tackle. He's a natural left tackle, and we got him playing right guard.
Yeah.
So, like, the experience along all the positions, the ability to play at a high level at each of these positions.
I think Pro Bowl his first year as a starter.
Exactly. I think it really gets lost to how good that Landon is, man.
Yeah, he's the real deal. And you can run that. Having that great guard is how you run your screens, how he can, how Jalen Hurts can be so impactful as a runner. He depends on those guys. And I think that Cam Jurgens can fit in at right guard and do probably just as well as Isaac Seumalo. And Dickerson is a special talent. They just have to hope that he keeps doing the right things and keeps his feet and ankles and knees all intact. And so far, so good. But he is a big dude. I'm telling you that. You don't realize how big a dude he is until you see him in person.
That left side of the line is pretty massive. I mean, you got Mailata down to, and then it's funny because you go Mailata, Dickerson, and then like Kelsey's like normal person size,
280, 285. And these guys are 340. And Landon Dickerson has all the kind of the instincts that an American player has. I think that some of those instinctive plays, Jordan Mailata is still learning, but he's an incredible athlete. There's no question about it. And he's really warmed to the position. And right tackle doesn't get any better. So as long as you have that core of your O-line together, the Eagles are next year will go into the season and a quarterback of that caliber. You can find, Kenneth Gainwells and all that, and they draft it in the offseason. You're gonna run the ball, right? And and you have 2 premier wide receivers. I'm sure they're gonna dump. I would be surprised if Quez Watkins comes back. He's been here long enough, and I think it's time to move on. So we'll see if they maybe pick a receiver in the draft, and maybe they get lucky and find somebody special. So we'll see what happens.
Absolutely. So actually, before we head out, one last question. So
okay.
One of my favorite memories of meeting you on the plane was you telling me some stories about Baldy and how you helped you helped with getting him started, especially in the media world. And I just thought that was such a cool concept. Do you have any quick Baldy stories you could give the
hopefully he doesn't watch this, but the before 9/11, when he was still playing, these guys have money, and he was driving a little Mercedes Benz, like a sports car in Mercedes. And I'm a director of a small radio station. You can credential people. And now this is before 9/11. He would never do this now. Things were a lot lax in those days. Mm-hmm. I was getting him credentials because he wanted to learn to be in the media. He was still playing for the Eagles, and he took a course at ESPN. Didn't like it, and they didn't really give him any work. They didn't put him on the air or anything. They just, he said, I spent $6,500 for nothing. So, but I said, you just got to work. So I would ask for credentials for him to cover these NBA games. So he's going to I couldn't believe they granted them. He was going to Chicago Bulls with Jordan against the Indiana Pacers with Reggie Miller, their conference final, game 3, and it's in Indianapolis. So he has to get there, and he can't miss any practices or anything. It might have been after the season was over. Yeah, it would have been after the season's over. But one time he was late, and he had a credential for the game, and he didn't want to miss it. He was starting to really meet people. And that's how he got the job, was networking at all these big events, right? And he was late for his flight, and he's going to miss the flight. If he tries to park the car in some lot, get the ticket, and go, go through whatever, he's not going to make the plane. So he just pulls the Mercedes up to the gate. It's out of the car and just leaves it there.
Oh my God.
Today that sounds ridiculous, but in those days, apparently he had done it before because he knew exactly where they were going to tow it. He knew the fine, and he
legendary. That's hilarious. That thinking on your feet, he knew where he could go get it. He said, might as well, I'll bite the bullet on this.
This is in the 90s, you have to understand. Yeah. And it wasn't so insane. Somebody taught him that. You know what I mean? He didn't just figure that out himself. Somebody else taught him. You know what I mean? Somebody else did that. I'm sure people did it. They just left the car there. They're going to tow it away. I've got money, so there you go. There's my Baldy story.
Might as well.
I hope I don't get a call tomorrow. What are you telling that crap for?
Oh man. Well, thank you so much, Al. I know we talked about it before, but just to get you on for real has been a true pleasure, and we've all had a great time and really learned a lot from you and really value your time.
Well, Quell, Parth, Pierre, thank you for having your names up there so I don't have to remember them. And it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Always, man. Anytime you want to come back, you're definitely welcome.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And just before we get out of here, thank everybody for listening. Thank everybody who tuned into the stream. And we're gonna release this as a pod also. On whichever podcast streaming platform you're listening on, be sure to leave us a like and review. And yeah, thank you for listening.
Go get your dollars. Dollar bill, y'all. I'll not give y'all no money, but we got y'all.
Yeah.
Go Birds.
Go Birds.